I'm Nova, 29, female, and my relationship only became a problem for my boyfriend when the silence he asked for extended to the car insurance, phone bill, and rent that I paid for. It's funny, in a bleak, unfunny way, how quickly a desire for space vanishes when that space is no longer subsidized. For 2 years, my role in our relationship had been clearly, if unofficially, defined. I was the provider, the planner, the steady foundation upon which my boyfriend Leo could build his dreams, and I was happy to do it truly. As a software engineer with a stable, well-paying job, I had the means. He was a freelance graphic designer and artist with a soul too vibrant, he said, to be crushed by the gears of a 9-to-5 corporate machine. I loved his passion. I loved his art. I thought I was investing in us, in our shared future. I saw myself as the supportive partner, the woman behind the man, watering the seeds of his talent until they could flourish on their own. It turns out, I was just the groundskeeper for a garden he never intended to let me sit in. Our life together was a comfortable one, especially for him. We lived in a bright, airy one-bedroom apartment downtown, close to the cafes he liked to work from. The rent, a significant sum in our city, was auto-debited from my bank account on the first of every month. His car, a reliable used sedan we picked out together, was insured under a policy that I managed and paid for. His phone, a top-of-the-line model perfect for staying connected with clients, was on my family plan. I didn't do these things to hold them over his head. I did them because I loved him and because, practically speaking, his freelance income was a wildly unpredictable stream. A trickle one month, a small flood the next, but never enough to consistently cover the essentials. I took care of the boring, adult things so he could be free to create. It felt like a fair division of labor, a partnership. But looking back, the signs of imbalance were there from the beginning, little cracks in the foundation I was so carefully trying to build. I remember our first anniversary. I had spent weeks planning a surprise weekend trip to a quiet coastal town. I booked a beautiful little cabin, made reservations at a restaurant known for its seafood, and even took 2 days off work, something my demanding job rarely allowed. The day before we were set to leave, I presented him with a small box containing a card with the travel details. He opened it, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Wow, Nova, this is amazing," he said, and my heart soared. But then he added, "It's just, this weekend is tough. I just got a new brief from a client, a really big opportunity, and the deadline is Monday." I tried to be understanding. "Okay," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "Can't you bring your laptop? You could work for a few hours in the afternoons." He gave me a look, a mix of pity and frustration. "You don't get it. This isn't like your job where you can just clock in and clock out. I need to be in my zone, in my space. The creative flow, it's delicate." We didn't go on the trip. I canceled the reservations and lost the deposit on the cabin. I spent my 2 days off tidying the apartment and doing laundry while he sat, headphones on, intensely focused on his project. He was so passionate, I told myself. It was admirable, but on the following Monday, when I asked how the project went, he shrugged. The client changed their mind on the whole concept, all that work for nothing. He didn't mention the canceled trip. He didn't apologize. He just moved on, leaving me to quietly unpack the bag I had so excitedly packed. Another time, it was my 30th birthday approaching. My friends kept asking what Leo had planned for me. "I don't know," I'd say with a smile. "He's very creative. I'm sure it will be something special." In my mind, I pictured a romantic dinner, a piece of his art made just for me, maybe even just a quiet evening where he made me feel like the center of the universe. The day came, and he woke me up with a kiss and a "happy birthday, babe." He made coffee, which was nice, but then he retreated to his desk. By lunchtime, I realized he had forgotten the significance of the day beyond a simple morning greeting. I subtly mentioned my mom had called to wish me a happy birthday. "Oh, right, 30, that's a big one," he said, as if just remembering. "We should do something tonight." That something ended up being takeout from our usual Thai place, eaten on the couch while he scrolled through design forums on his phone. There was no card, no gift. When I finally gently expressed my disappointment, he became defensive. "Nova, you know I'm swamped right now and money is tight." I looked at him, my heart aching. Money was tight for him. I had just paid the rent, the car insurance, and the phone bill days earlier. I had just bought the groceries we were eating. I wasn't asking for a lavvy. SH gift, just a thoughtful gesture. I wanted to feel seen. Instead, I felt like an item on a to-do list he had forgotten to check off. I went to bed that night feeling a profound sense of loneliness despite him sleeping right next to me. The pattern was always the same. His needs, his career, his comfort were always the priority. My contributions were the silent, invisible infrastructure that made his life possible, as taken for granted as running water or electricity. My attempts to connect, to build a life that was truly ours, were increasingly met with a kind of weary impatience. My daily "How was your day?" texts, my calls on my way home from work, my desire to spend quiet evenings together, all the small, ordinary acts of a person in a committed relationship, were starting to be framed not as affection but as an imposition. The foundation I had built was strong, but I was the only one living in the house. He was just using it for shelter, and soon he would make it very clear that he wanted me to stop knocking on his door. The week leading up to the final, fatal conversation was, in retrospect, a masterclass in emotional disconnect. It began on a Monday morning. I had a huge presentation at work, the culmination of a 3-month project. I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. As I was getting ready, I mentioned it to Leo, who was sipping coffee and staring intently at his tablet. "Big day today," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "The final project showcase is at 10 a.m. I'm hoping it goes well. It could lead to a promotion." Oh, cool," he murmured, his eyes not leaving the screen. "You'll do great." There was no follow-up question, no "what's the project about?" or "tell me about the promotion." It was a conversational period at the end of a sentence he hadn't even bothered to read. I felt a familiar pang of disappointment but pushed it down. He was focused. That was Leo. It was part of what made him a good designer, I reasoned. That evening, I came home buzzing with adrenaline. The presentation had been a massive success. My boss had pulled me aside afterward, beaming, and told me the promotion was essentially a done deal. I walked into the apartment, my briefcase feeling 10 pounds lighter, ready to burst with the good news. I found Leo on the couch, controller in hand, deeply immersed in a video game. The sounds of explosions and gunfire filled the living room. "Hey," I said a little too loudly, "I'm home." He gave a little wave without looking away from the screen. "Hey, how'd it go?" he asked, his question punctuated by a series of frantic button mashes. "It was amazing, better than I could have hoped. Mr. Davison said the promotion is pretty much mine." I waited, expecting him to pause the game, to turn and look at me, to share in my victory. Instead, he just said, "That's awesome, babe, knew you could do it." His character on screen died. "Arg, come on," he groaned, leaning forward with renewed focus. And that was it. My career milestone, a moment of personal triumph, was reduced to background noise for his digital battle. I stood in the entryway for a full minute, my good news deflating like a popped balloon. I didn't want a parade. I just wanted 5 minutes of his undivided attention. I wanted to feel like my life mattered to him as much as his mattered to me. I quietly went into the kitchen, ordered a pizza for myself because I was too drained to cook, and ate it at the small kitchen table alone. The sounds of his game were the only dinner music. The week continued in this vein. My attempts at connection were like tossing pebbles into a well. I'd ask about his day and he'd give one-word answers. I'd suggest we go for a walk after dinner and he'd say he needed to decompress with his game or a movie. He was physically present but emotionally 1,000 miles away. He was treating our shared apartment like a hotel where he got free room, board, and utilities, and I was the ever-present but mostly invisible manager. The final conversation happened on a Thursday evening. It was unremarkable, which made it all the more devastating. I was on my way home from work, sitting in traffic. As I did most days, I called him. It was our routine, a way for me to unwind from my day and reconnect with him before I even walked through the door. "Hey, it's me," I said when he answered. "Just leaving the office. Traffic is a nightmare. How was your day?" There was a long, heavy sigh on the other end of the line. It was a sound I had come to dread, the sound of my affection being received as a burden. "Nova," he said, his voice flat and weary, "we need to talk about this." "And talk about what, the traffic?" I asked, confused. "No, this, the calling, the texting, all of it," he said. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My stomach twisted. "What do you mean, all of it?" I need some space, he said, and the cliche of it was like a slap in the face. I feel like I can't breathe sometimes. You're always checking in, always asking what I'm doing. It's a bit clingy. Clingy, the word hit me with the force of a physical blow. Clingy, was that what this was? My desire to share a life with my partner? My attempts to show I cared? Was my love the very love that paid for the phone he was holding, the apartment he was sitting in, the food he was about to eat being defined as a desperate, suffocating need? I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. Clingy, I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Leo, I call you on my way home from work. I ask about your day. That's what people in relationships do. Yeah, but not every single day, he shot back, his voice rising with frustration. It's constant. We live together. We'll see each other in 20 minutes. Do we really need a status update? I need to be able to have my own thoughts, my own time, without feeling like I have to report back to you. The injustice of it all burned in my chest. I was the one who worked a demanding, high-stress job. I was the one who managed our finances, our household, our lives. He had nothing but his own time all day, every day, a freedom I had personally and financially guaranteed. And he was accusing me of suffocating him. The traffic in front of me started to move, but I felt paralyzed. Something inside me, a belief I had held onto for 2 years, finally fractured. The belief that we were a team. The belief that my support was seen and valued. In that moment, it all crumbled, revealing the ugly truth. I was not his partner, I was his patron. And he was tired of the artist-patron relationship, at least the parts that required him to be polite to his benefactor. He must have sensed my silence because his tone softened slightly, becoming patronizing. Look, let's not make a big deal out of this. I just think we'd both be happier if we had a little more independence. We don't need to talk every day. A strange calm washed over me. It was the kind of calm that comes after the storm has passed, leaving a quiet, desolate landscape. The anger and hurt receded, and in their place was a cold, hard clarity. He had just handed me the solution. He wanted space. He wanted silence. He wanted independence. I took a deep breath. You're right, I said, my voice even and devoid of emotion. My apologies. Oh, good, he said, sounding relieved. I'm glad you understand. I do, I said. I understand perfectly. I ended the call. I drove the rest of the way home in complete silence, the radio off, my mind whirring. He wanted distance. I would give him distance. The kind of absolute comprehensive distance he couldn't even begin to imagine. He had just asked to be independent, and as his primary benefactor, I was in the unique position to grant his wish. When I walked into the apartment that night, Leo was on the couch, just as I'd pictured him. He looked up and gave me a small, tentative smile, the kind you give someone after a difficult conversation, hoping everything is okay. Hey, he said, you okay? I'm fine, I replied, my voice neutral. I didn't look at him. I walked past the living room, straight into our bedroom, and closed the door behind me. I could feel his confused gaze on my back. Usually I would come in, drop my things, and join him on the couch, asking again about his day. The break in routine was the first small tremor of the earthquake to come. Inside the bedroom, I didn't change out of my work clothes. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my laptop. My hands were steady, my mind was a sea of glass, the hurt from his words, clingy, we don't need to talk every day, hadn't vanished. It had simply transmuted into something else, resolve. He had mistaken my love for neediness. He had mistaken my support for control. He had fundamentally misunderstood the very nature of our relationship, and in doing so had revealed it to be a sham. A partnership requires participation from both sides. He had just formally tendered his resignation. I was merely accepting it. The first thing I did was open my email. I found our landlord's contact information and composed a new message. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the clicks sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Subject: lease termination for apartment 7B. Dear Mr. Henderson, please accept this email as my official 30-day notice to terminate the lease for apartment 7B as per our agreement. My final day of tenancy will be August 21st, 2025. The final month's rent has already been paid. I will ensure the apartment is professionally cleaned and left in excellent condition. Please let me know the procedure for the final walkthrough and key return. Oh, thank you. Nova. I read it over once. It was professional, direct, and final. There was no emotion in it, just facts. I clicked send without a moment's hesitation. The little whoosh sound from my laptop was the first domino falling. He had 1 month before his free ride came to a screeching halt. Next, I navigated to the website for our mobile carrier. I logged into my account, the password saved in my browser. The main page showed a summary of my plan, 4 lines, one for me, one for my mom, one for my younger brother, and one for Leo. His line was clearly labeled. I clicked on Manage Lines and then Cancel a Line. The website presented me with a series of prompts asking if I was sure, offering me better deals to stay. I clicked through them all with a cold efficiency. The final confirmation screen appeared. Leo's line will be disconnected at the end of the current billing cycle on July 31st. That gave him about 10 days. Perfect. I confirmed the cancellation. Another domino fell. The last major task was the car insurance. This one was slightly more complicated because his name was on the policy as a driver, but the policy itself and the payments were all mine. I logged into the insurance portal. I saw the policy details, the make and model of his sedan, and the premium that was automatically deducted from my checking account every 6 months. I found the section for policy changes and selected Remove a Driver. I typed in his name and date of birth. The system asked for a reason. I paused for a second, then selected No longer has access to the vehicle. In a way, it was true. Soon, he wouldn't. The website informed me that the change would take effect within 24 hours and that my premium would be adjusted accordingly. The confirmation email arrived almost instantly. The final major domino had toppled. I closed my laptop and finally took a deep breath. I didn't feel angry or vindictive. I felt clean. I had spent 2 years contorting myself to fit into the role of the cool, supportive girlfriend, burying my own needs and disappointments to keep the peace, to keep his fragile, creative ego intact. I had absorbed his moods, managed his life, and paid his bills, all in the name of a love he had just casually dismissed as clingy. He wanted to be an independent man, free from my daily check-ins. Well, now he could be. Independence, I thought, was a full-time job. It was time for him to start his first shift. I stood up, changed into comfortable clothes, and walked out of the bedroom. Leo was still on the couch, but he'd paused his game. He looked at me with an uncertain expression. Is everything all right? He asked. You were in there for a while. Just catching up on some work emails, I said smoothly. It wasn't even a lie. I'm a little tired. I think I'm just going to read for a bit and head to bed early. Oh, okay, he said, clearly thrown off. He had expected an argument or tears or a long, drawn-out emotional discussion. He had braced himself for the very clinginess he so despised. What he got instead was quiet compliance. He got the space he asked for. He looked more confused than relieved. I gave him a small, polite smile. Good night, Leo. Good night, Nova, he said, as I retreated back into the bedroom, closing the door on him once again. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. I didn't lie awake wondering if he was happy, if I was doing enough, if we were going to make it. I knew we weren't. The relationship was already over. He had ended it over the phone. All I had done was file the paperwork. The first few days were strangely peaceful. I followed through on my promise, both spoken and unspoken. I gave him silence. I woke up each morning, got ready for work, and left the apartment with a simple, have a good day. I no longer made him coffee. I no longer asked about his client's schedule or what his plans were. When I was at work, I didn't text, I didn't call. My phone, which had once been a constant tether to him, now remained silent in my purse, buzzing only with work emails and messages from my family. On my drives home, I listened to music or podcasts, filling the time that had once been reserved for him. It felt liberating. I hadn't realized how much mental energy I had dedicated to our daily check-ins, how much I had moderated my own moods to accommodate his. If I had a bad day, I'd try to sound cheerful on the phone so as not to burden him. If I had a great day, I'd temper my excitement so he wouldn't feel bad if his day had been slow. Now I just felt my own feelings. The drive became my own again. Evenings in the apartment transformed. I'd arrive home and he'd be there, usually at his desk or on the couch, and he'd look up, a hopeful or questioning look in his eyes. I would give him a polite nod and then busy myself with my own things. I cooked dinner for myself, I read books. I called my friends and family and had long, uninterrupted conversations. I was creating a bubble of my own life right in the middle of the apartment we still shared. I was a ghost in my own home, and it was driving him crazy. At first, I think Leo truly believed he was enjoying it, He had gotten what he wanted, no more clingy Nova. He had the freedom to immerse himself in his work or his games without interruption. I could see him posting on social media, sharing a new logo concept he was working on with the caption, "Finally in the zone," or a screenshot of a video game victory caption, "Total domination." He was performing his contentment for the world, trying to prove that he was thriving with his newfound space. But the performance began to crack around day 4. The silence from me was no longer a relief, it was a void. He started trying to initiate the very interactions he had rejected. "So how was your day?" he asked one evening as I was washing my dishes. "It was fine," I replied, not turning around. "Productive." "Just fine. Anything interesting happen?" he prodded. I rinsed the last plate and put it in the dishwasher. I turned to him, wiping my hands on a towel. "Nothing out of the ordinary," I said with a slight, meaningless smile. "How was yours?" I asked the question with the same level of interest one might ask a stranger in an elevator. "It was okay," he said, his bravado deflating. "Client is being a pain, but you know, the usual." He was waiting for me to ask for details, to offer sympathy, to play my part. I didn't. "That's tough," I said, and then I walked out of the kitchen. The apartment, once filled with the constant low hum of my efforts to engage him, was now dominated by a heavy, oppressive silence. He tried to fill it. He'd play his music louder, he'd talk to himself while he was gaming. He'd make loud, pointed phone calls to his friends, laughing uproariously, but it was all just noise. It couldn't fill the space I had deliberately created, the space he had asked for. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like a scientist observing an experiment. My hypothesis was that his desire for independence was a complete fiction, a fantasy he could only afford because I was paying for it. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a mother, someone to manage the tedious parts of life while he played. And when the mother figure suddenly became a quiet, polite roommate, he was completely lost. The quiet had a different effect on me. It was restorative. I started going to the gym after work, something I'd always told myself I was too tired to do. I reconnected with old hobbies. I bought a set of watercolors and started painting again, a passion I had let slide because I was always so focused on supporting his creative endeavors. I discovered that with all the time and energy I was no longer pouring into Leo, I had an abundance left over for myself. I felt lighter. I felt like I was remembering who I was before I became Leo's girlfriend. The true test of my resolve and the beginning of his real panic came exactly 10 days after the fateful phone call. It was the end of the billing cycle. I was in my room reading when I heard him curse loudly from the living room. "What the heck?" he yelled, not to me but to the universe. I didn't respond, I just turned the page of my book. A moment later, my bedroom door opened without a knock. Leo stood there, his phone in his hand, a look of utter bewilderment on his face. "My phone isn't working," he said, as if I were the IT help desk. "It says no service. I can't make calls or anything. Did you forget to pay the bill?" There it was, the first real consequence. He didn't assume malice. He assumed incompetence on my part, a simple mistake, a lapse in my duties as the manager of his life. I looked up from my book, my expression calm. "No, I didn't forget." He stared at me, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean? Then why isn't it working? It's on your plans." "It was on my plan," I corrected him gently. "The billing cycle just ended." The confusion on his face slowly began to morph into dawning horror as the implication of my words sank in. "What are you talking about, Nova? Did you take me off your plan?" I closed my book, marking my page carefully. I gave him my full, undivided attention, just as he had always wanted. "You said you wanted space, Leo," I said, my voice soft but firm. You said we didn't need to talk every day. A shared phone plan felt a bit too interconnected for that. I figured you'd want to handle your own. He looked as if I had just slapped him. He was speechless. He just stood there, his mouth slightly open, the now useless phone clutched in his hand. The silence he had so desperately craved was starting to get very, very loud. Leo stared at me from the doorway, his face a canvas of disbelief. You canceled my phone service? He finally choked out, the words laced with an indignation that I found almost comical. I didn't cancel it, I said, maintaining my serene demeanor. I simply removed the line from my account. You're a freelance professional. I assumed you would want a phone plan under your own business name anyway. It's more professional, don't you think? He's boo. He turned, searching for a response. But why? Why would you do that without telling me? I did tell you, I countered calmly. You told me you wanted independence. You said you felt suffocated. I listened and I took steps to give you the independence you asked for. This is part of that. That's not what I meant, he exclaimed, his voice rising in panic. I meant I just needed a little space, not to be cut off from the world. A phone is for communication, I pointed out logically. You specifically requested less communication from me. I'm just honoring your request in a more comprehensive way. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure frustration. This is insane. This is completely insane. I have clients. How am I supposed to talk to them? There are public Wi-Fi networks all over the city, I suggested helpfully. The cafes you like to work from all have them. You can use email or messaging apps, or you could go to a phone store tomorrow and get your own plan. I'm sure they have some great deals for new customers. He looked at me as if I had grown a second head. The idea of him having to navigate the bureaucracy of a cell phone company to compare plans, to pay a deposit, it was clearly a foreign and terrifying concept. For 2 years, it had just worked. He had never once had to think about it. He backed out of the room, shaking his head and muttering, I can't believe this. He didn't slam the door, but he closed it with a sharp, angry click. I listened to him pacing back and forth in the living room for a few minutes before the apartment fell silent again. The next few days were fraught with a new kind of tension. He had found a way to use Wi-Fi-based messaging, and my phone was now subject to a barrage of texts from him. At first, they were angry and accusatory. Leo, this is a childish game, Nova. Turn my phone back on. Leo, are you seriously not going to respond after everything? Leo, I have a deadline. I need to be able to talk to my client. You're sabotaging my career. I read them all and responded to none of them. My silence was my answer. He was a 27-year-old man. If he couldn't figure out how to acquire basic phone service, that was not my problem to solve. After the anger failed, he switched to a pleading tone. Leo, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I said you were clingy. It was a stupid thing to say. Can we please just talk about this? Leo, Nova, please. I can't afford a new plan right now. You know that? Just turn it back on and I'll pay you back when I get my next check. His promises of paying me back were as empty as his side of the closet, which contained clothes I had mostly bought for him. I knew that next check was a mythical creature, always just around the corner but never actually arriving. The second crack appeared a few days later. It was a Saturday morning. I was enjoying a cup of coffee and reading on the balcony when he came out, a letter in his hand. His face was pale. What is this? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. He held out an official-looking envelope from our auto insurance company. I glanced at it. It looks like a letter from the insurance company, I stated simply. I know what it is, he snapped. It's a notice of cancellation. It says my coverage lapsed 3 days ago because of non-payment. It says I'm driving an uninsured vehicle. Nova, that's illegal. I could get my license suspended. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Yes, driving without insurance is illegal. You should probably take care of that. Take care of it, you take care of it, it's your policy, he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. It is my policy, I agreed. And my policy covers my car. I took your car off my policy a couple of weeks ago. I figured, as an independent man, you'd want to manage your own automotive affairs. He looked absolutely thunderstruck. The phone was one thing, an inconvenience, a professional handicap, but the car was his freedom. It was his ability to go wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted. It was the chariot for his freewheeling, artistic lifestyle, and I had just taken the wheels off. Why, he whispered, all the fight draining out of him. Why are you doing this, Novus? I finally put my book down and looked at him, my gaze steady. I'm not doing anything to you, Leo. I'm simply stopping the things I used to do for you. You told me you wanted to be your own person, separate from me, so I'm separating myself from you. My finances, my responsibilities, my name on your bills, this is what you asked for. I asked for some space, not to be homeless and phoneless, he cried. I'm not making you homeless, I said. You have a roof over your head. I paused, letting the unspoken words hang in the air for now. He didn't catch the implication. His mind was still reeling from the 1-2 punch of the phone and the car. He slumped into the other balcony chair, the letter crinkling in his fist. He looked small and lost, a pea. Part of me, the old caretaker part, felt a flicker of pity, but I extinguished it. Pity was what had gotten me into this situation. Pity was what had allowed me to be a doormat for 2 years. What I needed now was not pity, but principle. He was finally experiencing the true cost of the life he was living. The phone bill, the insurance premium, they weren't just numbers on a screen to me. They were hours of my life, hours of dealing with difficult code, of sitting in meetings, of pushing through projects. I had traded my time and my energy for that money, money I had then gladly spent to make his life easier. He had never seen the sacrifice, only the benefit. Now, for the first time, he was seeing the invoice, and he had no way to pay it. He sat there in silence for a long time, staring out at the city. The confident, carefree artist was gone. In his place was a scared young man face to face with the consequences of his own words. The silence between us was no longer my choice alone. He was now silent too, trapped in the space he had so foolishly demanded. The final, inevitable explosion came a week later. It was the 1st of August. Rent day. For 2 years, the first of the month had been a non-event for Leo. The money would magically leave my account and life would continue uninterrupted. He had never even seen the lease, let alone worried about how to pay for it. I knew the notice from the landlord would have been posted on our door the previous day, as per standard procedure when a lease is not being renewed. It would be a formal, legal document stating that the tenancy of Nova last name was ending and that the premises must be vacated by August 21st. I had been waiting for it to detonate. It happened on a Tuesday evening. I came home from a long day at work, feeling tired but content. I had just gotten the official offer letter for my promotion, complete with a significant raise. It felt like the universe was rewarding me for taking back my life. As I walked down the hallway toward our apartment, I saw him. Leo was standing by the door, his back to me. He was reading the notice. His shoulders were slumped, and even from behind, I could see the tension radiating from him. He heard my footsteps and whirled around. His face was a mess of rage and fear. He held up the paper, his hand shaking. "What is this?" he roared, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. I calmly unlocked the door and pushed it open, gesturing for him to come inside rather than cause a scene for our neighbors. "It's a notice of lease termination," I said, my voice level. He followed me inside, slamming the door behind him. "I can read, Nova. It says we're being kicked out. It says the lease is ending. Why is the lease ending?" I dropped my bag on the entryway table and turned to face him fully. I crossed my arms, not as a defensive gesture, but to keep myself steady. "The lease isn't ending. My lease is ending. I gave my 30-day notice, just like we discussed." "We never discussed this," he yelled, taking a step toward me. "You are throwing me out on the street. Is that what this is? Some kind of sick, twisted revenge because I said I needed some space?" "This isn't revenge, Leo," I said, my voice remaining quiet, which only seemed to make him angrier. "This is a consequence. It's the logical conclusion of the conversation we had. You wanted out of the clingy, talk everyday partnership. I'm simply dissolving the partnership, all of it." Partnership, he scoffed, a bitter, ugly sound. You call this a partnership? You've been acting like a cold-hearted robot for weeks, systematically dismantling my life. You canceled my phone, my insurance, and now you're making me homeless. How could you be so cruel, so vindictive? I let him finish his tirade, let the accusations hang in the air. When he was done, panting with fury, I finally spoke. Cruel? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. Let's talk about what's cruel, Leo. Is it cruel to want to know how the person you love is doing? Is it cruel to want to celebrate a career achievement with your partner? Is it cruel to hope for a thoughtful gesture on your birthday? Because that's all I ever asked for. And what I got in return was sighs, eye rolls, and a lecture about how my affection was suffocating. He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed, but the fear quickly replaced it with more anger. That's different. That's emotional stuff. This is my life, my actual physical life. Where am I supposed to go? That's the core of the problem, isn't it? I said, taking a step closer myself, my voice filled with a passion I had suppressed for far too long. You thought the emotional stuff and the actual physical life were two separate things. You thought you could reject one and keep the other. You thought you could have all the benefits of my income, my stability, and my planning without having to offer any emotional support, respect, or appreciation in return. You thought you could treat me like a convenience, an ATM, a house manager, but not like a girlfriend, not like a partner. I gestured around the apartment, the beautiful space he took for granted. This apartment, the car you drive, the phone you used to use, they weren't just things, Leo. They were physical manifestations of my love for you. They were products of my hard work, gifts I gave you freely because I believed we were building a future together. A future where we were a team, but you didn't want a teammate. You told me so yourself. You wanted an investor who never showed up to the board meetings. Well, this investor is cashing out. Tears of frustration and helplessness welled in his eyes. So that's it, you're just done? After 2 years, you're throwing it all away. I'm not the one who threw it away, I said, the finality of it all settling into my bones. You did, you threw it away when you called my love clingy. You threw it away when you made me feel small for wanting to connect with you. You threw it away when you took everything and gave nothing. I'm just cleaning up the mess. He stared at me, the fight finally extinguished, replaced by a devastating understanding. He finally saw it. He saw the connection between the phone call he made and the notice he was holding. He saw that the emotional and the practical were not separate ledgers, they were two sides of the same coin. He had devalued the currency of our relationship, and now he was finding out he was bankrupt. What am I going to do? He whispered, sinking onto the arm of the couch. He looked like a child. I looked at him, and for the last time, I felt a twinge of the old dynamic, the urge to fix it, to make it better. But I couldn't. It wasn't my problem anymore. You're a talented graphic designer, I said, my voice softening just a fraction, a final, parting gift of encouragement. You'll figure it out. You wanted to be independent. Here's your chance. The last 3 weeks of August were the most awkward and miserable of my life. The apartment became a territory divided by a Cold War. Leo spent most of his time in the living room, frantically applying for freelance jobs on his laptop, tethered to the Wi-Fi I was still paying for until the very end. He was a whirlwind of panicked energy, making hushed, stressed phone calls to friends and family, trying to find a place to land. He barely spoke to me, and when he did, his words were clipped, coated in a layer of resentment. I stayed in my lane. I came home from work, cooked my meals, and retreated to the bedroom. I started packing my things into boxes, labeling them with a black marker: kitchen, books, clothes. Each sealed box felt like a step toward my new life. Leo would watch me sometimes, his expression a mixture of anger and despair. He saw me systematically erasing myself from the life we had shared, and he was powerless to stop it. He had started a process he couldn't control, and I was simply seeing it through to its logical conclusion. He finally found a room to rent in a shared house out in the suburbs, a place far from the trendy downtown cafes and a significant downgrade from the life he was used to. His parents had to co-sign the lease and pay the security deposit for him. The day he moved out was gray and overcast, matching the mood perfectly. Two of his friends came over with a pickup truck. They moved his things, his desk, his computer, his clothes, the few pieces of furniture he had actually owned before he met me, in a grim, silent procession. The last item to go was a large canvas, a painting he had made that I had loved and had professionally framed. It was an abstract piece with bold, vibrant colors that had always felt like his soul on display. As his friend carried it out, Leo and I were left alone in the now cavernous living room for the last time. So he said, breaking the silence, "This is it." "Oh, this is it," I agreed. He looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, the anger was gone, replaced by a raw, painful sadness. "I messed up, Nova," he said, his voice quiet. "I know I did. I was a fool. I took you for granted. I took all of this for granted." I nodded slowly. An apology was nice to hear, but it was far too late. It was a bandage offered for a wound that had already scarred over. "Yes, you did." Is there any chance we could start over?" he asked, the hope in his voice so faint it was almost imperceptible. I looked at him, the man I had once loved so fiercely I was willing to build a world for him, and I felt nothing. The love had been eroded, particle by particle, by every dismissed compliment, every forgotten birthday, every sigh of impatience, until there was nothing left but a hard bedrock of self-preservation. "No, Leo," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "We can't. You showed me who you were in our relationship. I can't unsee that, and I've shown myself who I can be without it. I can't go back." He nodded, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. He wiped it away angrily. "Right, the independent woman." There was still a hint of bitterness in his tone. "No," I corrected him. "Just a woman who knows her own value now. I wish you the best, Leo. I really do. I hope you find what you're looking for." He gave a short, mirthless laugh. "Yeah, me too." And with that, he turned and walked out the door, closing it softly behind him. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of the weeks before. It was a clean, light, and liberating silence. It was the sound of a new beginning, my beginning. In the months since he left, my life has completely changed. I moved into a smaller, cozier apartment just for me. It's filled with my things, my colors, my paintings on the walls. The promotion at work has been amazing, challenging me in the best ways. The raise that came with it sits in my bank account, and I find myself planning for my future, saving for a down payment on my own condo, planning a solo trip to Italy I've always dreamed of. I learned a hard lesson. I learned that you cannot pour your love, your energy, and your money into someone who is not willing to invest in you in return. A partnership isn't about one person being the strong foundation and the other being the beautiful sculpture. It's about two people working together with their own tools to build something shared. Leo wanted me to be his foundation, but he didn't want me in the building. I don't hate him, I just don't think about him much anymore. He exists somewhere out in the world, learning how to pay his own bills, learning that independence isn't a romantic ideal but a daily grind. Maybe this experience will be the making of him. I hope so, but his story is no longer tied to mine. My story is just beginning, and for the first time in a long time, I am the only author. So for anyone out there who feels like they're giving more than they're getting, who feels like their love is being treated as an obligation rather than a gift, I have to ask, what would happen if you gave them the silence they seem to be asking for? You might find that the only thing you lose is the weight of an unreciprocated life.